are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for signing up and joining this webinar presented by Cordium on behalf of broker dealers. We appreciate you signing up, and hopefully we'll have some information for you today regarding FINRA audits and what you were to expect to receive. And of course, we'll have some question and answers for you at the end. But again, we thank everyone for coming on, and we appreciate you signing up for this. We want to get started kind of right away. There's a lot to cover, so we want to make sure that you do have a session of questions and answers at the end, and make sure that we have time for that today. So right off the bat here, our introduction here is some of the purposes of the questionnaire you receive in an audit. Why is it important? And what are the consequences of getting it wrong, and some of the things to look out for. I think the biggest point here is the consequences of getting it wrong. As we all know, if you do have problems during a FINRA audit, they do not look very favorably upon that. So it's been our experience that registered person questionnaires that come down through WebIR are often part of the initial documents and information requested during the audit. So this questionnaire, what happens is you get a copy of this and they ask you to give it out to everyone registered or not registered at your firm. And we're going to go through this and sample some of the questions that are on this particular document that I would say 99% of each firm receives this particular document to pass around to their employees. So it's omni important that you as the compliance professionals take a look at this first and then sit with your employees who are answering these questions on their behalf and make sure that they are presentable to the regulators. So some of the key tips for some of the more important and standard type of questions. We've kind of grouped this together, starting with the simple questions on the questionnaires that require your basic standard response. I'm going to run through these and some of the key points that firms out there should adhere to, but also be wary of. And then we're going to get through some examples of some FINRA actions and some of the more intense questions that are on here that require a little more thought. All right, so right off to start, the organizational questions. You want to provide exact information that matches your firm's org chart. This is usually one of the top questions. They want to see an org chart and make sure it's up to date, 100% up to date with each position and their responsibility. I've seen a lot of org charts that just have the person listed under the department but doesn't have the exact person's responsibility. And that's for registered principals, registered reps, whoever's in that box. Just put a little description as to what they do. You want to avoid FINRA coming back and asking you that. It's all about getting the jump on them, if you would. And make sure it exactly matches what's on your website and what's on the person's U4. You would be surprised that you find out that your org chart is listed somebody as a principal and they're not really a principal just because they have that test. And when you give them this org chart, FINRA will ask and will seek to verify that all the registered person's titles and professional designations all match up. And be careful of the professional designations as well. Make sure that they are indeed professional and they do actually possess that designation. FINRA has been extremely cautious about letting firms use CPA or CFT, whatever it may be, certified financial planner. Make sure that it is not only approved, but it is true, and they have the credentials to back it up. You're going to get the complaint question. They want to make sure that you are not only filing complaints when they happen, but you're keeping track of them internally. So they want to know if you had any complaints, so you need to provide the customer name and description, the allegation, if there's been any litigation, arbitration, settlement request. They're usually going to go back 12 months, but if there's a history of complaints, then you will probably need to provide more. A lot of firms don't really have a lot of complaints. The larger firms may have a few, but your compliance department supervisor and the chief compliance officer should have these in a row. These are very important, and you should be able to provide them to FINRA. If you have a complaint that is new and you haven't filed it through WebCRD yet, I would still give it to them and let them know that information, that even if it's a verbal complaint that you're in the process of investigating, but you have not yet been tasked through WebCRD to file it, this lets FINRA know that you are on top of it, and you're proactive in giving them something that actually hasn't been filed. So keep that in mind if you have any complaints, whether they're verbal or just under consideration initially, that you provide each and every bit of detail that you possibly can. And you're moving on to disclosure questions. This is, of course, if there's been any criminal, civil, law enforcement, anything on anybody's U4 or over the last year or so, this is very important. You want to make sure that all of this information matches the firm's U4s that are on file, and anything that the firm has also undergone with any disclosures on Form BD. This is the most important part of our jobs as chief compliance officers, is to make sure we're on top of these. You should have all the information here. Again, this is being a very broad. The disclosures are something we are all very concerned with, and make sure that what you provide them are exact as to what is on the employee's U4. They also want to learn, one of the first questions FINRA will ask in this questionnaire are about your advertising. Your research, radio advertising, television advertising, all the details regarding the research reports or investment newsletters you've written in the last year or however far back they want. Any market-related or investment-related radio or TV broadcast that the firm or anyone at the firm has appeared on. I'm sure you've kept all this. Make sure you are able to provide this in any chronological format, venue, or medium they ask you for. If it's on a video, they're going to want it. If it's on a disc and you can provide it, they're going to want to see it. Even if you have gone through the process of getting it approved by FINRA, they're still going to want to make sure under books and records you're keeping track of. And it's part of the record keeping for correspondence going in and out of the firm. So they will also ask for a script if you're just doing some advertising. Make sure you have them. They are available, and you can provide it when asked. Again, these are more basic at this point. Seminars, forums, meetings, anything like that. This is especially important these days for firms, since seminars tend to be a regulatory focus as to why you're holding a seminar, what you're giving out at the seminar, what is the premise of the seminar, and especially if it's geared towards seniors or veterans, if it's geared toward a certain group of people, you really might want to make sure that this was approved by a principal at the firm, and it had some clearance as far as the compliance department was okay with what was written and how it was held and who was at these meetings. So give them all the information that they ask for when they ask for meetings, seminars, no matter how small it was. If it was a gathering of 5 or 6 people, I would still give it to them, because the problem here is if you do not disclose it and they find out you had this and you say, well, it was just a small little meeting, then you're getting an exception on your final report, most likely, just for not keeping track or providing that right away. Another thing that has come up recently in a lot of audits that I've seen here are jointly held accounts between your registered rep, and your customer. Surveillance of these accounts is hugely important, and a lot of firms are simply banning this practice, but I know a lot of firms out there still do allow this, And you got to know that this is a problem for a lot of firms at times. Please provide the account titles, the last digits of the account number, the investment accounts held internally or externally where an interest is maintained. If any of the accounts are jointly with a customer, get the customer name on there, the account number. You don't have to give them the whole account number, the last 4 digits, but as long as it matches up to a blotter. And then, a brief discussion on that spreadsheet you're giving them about the relationship with the customer, the reason the firm's allowing maintaining a joint interest, and copies of these arrangements. I've seen a lot of firms who don't have a great amount of compliance around these jointly held accounts get fined, censured, and have a lot of problems with this. So this is a big area where we feel, and I've seen in audits, that it has to be covered, and you have to have your documents in order. Any account that meets this criteria, have the surveillance around it, the reviews that you're ready to provide this for FINRA, and your controls should be extremely, extremely strong on this. I can't stress this enough. Just a quick point on this too, just to make sure that the rep and the customer, there's rationale why this relationship takes place. I've seen them ask that and the firm not really have an answer. So make sure that you're able to provide an answer as to why this is a jointly held account. Rule 144 stock accounts, we all know what they are. Be especially diligent over lower price securities, margin, and what sort of surveillance you're doing here. Provide them a list of all customers with this type of stock. This is where insider trading is discovered 9 times out of 10, and problems are discovered 9 times out of 10 with your answers to this. A lot of your Rule 144 stock is obviously control stock, publicly traded, and issues fall into these categories a lot. You really want to make sure that if you're providing this service for clients, that your diligence is there, you're providing your surveillance reasoning and rationale as to when and how frequently you do surveillance on these accounts, and especially be very diligent on any lower price securities. There's a lot of that going around here. We want to watch here for people that unscrupulously try to pitch securities at a low price and then dump them at a higher price. We've seen this happen at firms. It looked like some really strong insider Rule 144 stock, and it turned out to be a pump and dump type scheme. So please make sure that what you're providing FINRA on this question is extremely, extremely surveyed, and all of your proverbial ducks are in a row. Discretionary accounts. Again, we're seeing a lot of discretionary accounts be reviewed by FINRA, and they keep coming back and asking for, the main thing I see them asking for is rationale. Why is this a discretionary account? Is this person older, incompetent, whatever the problem may be? Is the financial advisor on the account have any conflict of interest? And are the investments suitable? And the trading within the account, is it rational? Is there turnover? What is the commission rate? The cost versus the return on the assets? You're going to have to provide all this, and this is very important that it is not only up to date and correct, but power of attorney proof. Everything that goes along with these accounts should be given to the regulator so they don't look any deeper into all your discretionary accounts. The initial amount that they ask for that you provide will determine how long this regulator is going to sit in your office, especially when you have a lot of discretionary accounts out there and they're looking for reasons why you're A, still holding discretionary accounts, and B, if you have the proper documentation and is the rationale correct. So a very important part of the documentation to provide. Okay, some of the other areas that will be on your questionnaire are U4 disclosures. They will ask for everything on the person's U4 matching up to what you are revealing because the questionnaire is going to ask the employee, do you have any disclosures? And your employee may write down something that will be a little bit different than is on his U4 or on the annual certification that they provide. It's important for you as a compliance officer and or compliance department person to go around and make sure that whoever is getting the questionnaire understands what they mean on this question about financial disclosures. During the year also, and then in your compliance meeting, it's very important to talk about what should be disclosed. Bankruptcies, compromises with creditors, bankruptcy petitions, or liens from the IRS. This all has to be revealed on the U4 as a disclosure. If it is not, if there is a question, I've seen this more times than I can count, is that a lien has been placed on a property by the IRS or one of your registered reps, and he goes and he takes care of it the month later. Well, guess what? That still has to be disclosed. The fact that there was a lien for even 5 business days, 3 days, 2 days, as long as the IRS has this data and it is available for FINRA to find out, then it should be disclosed. A lot of firms just say, the rep will say, hey, I had this lien, bang, I didn't know about it, I got it cleaned up. There's no reason to put it on their U4. You need to explain to that registered rep that there is a reason that goes on the U4 and we have to disclose it. And unfortunately, it's going to stay there for quite some time. It will follow the rep. So it's also important in your annual compliance meeting to say, hey, look, you want to try to avoid financial problems because investors have a right to know how their financial advisor is able to handle their own money. The next point, felony disclosures, obviously a big issue there. Of course, these things happen. However, most firms don't employ people with felonies. They just can't get a job. But if it happens while they're an employee of yours, then you need to provide exact dates and a full explanation. What is on that report? And again, ask this of your employees every year in your annual compliance meeting, as well as send out an email maybe quarterly if there's anything that needs to be changed on their U4. Again, we've seen this, that there has been a conviction or a pending conviction of an employee and it doesn't exactly hit the U4 in a timely manner. That's a big fine because, again, FINRA feels investors have a right to know. I think they do in this situation, whether there's a problem or not a problem with a felony. I get a lot of these questions about, just as a side note, whether some misdemeanors should be placed on the U4. And the answer to that is, unless it is a financial misdemeanor, if somebody is charged with a misdemeanor that's involving money of any sort, theft, that should be put on there. But if it is a misdemeanor of, let's say, a driving problem or an accident or a DUI or something like that that does not involve finance, then it does not have to go on the U4. Employees should reveal this to their employer, and again, this is a human resources type of issue as to what's going on personally in employees' lives. But remember, if your registered reps are doing things that you feel are reputationally bad for the firm, then you should consider their employment with your firm. And again, make sure everything that is reportable on a U4 is on the U4 and it matches exactly. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen somebody come up, get this questionnaire and disclose something they've never disclosed to you as a firm, but now are disclosing it to FINRA. So make sure you collect these before you submit them back to FINRA and you check the data that it matches on the U4 or any other document that you have on file for the employee. Again, that being the most important point of this entire webinar is to make sure you as a compliance officer in the compliance department knows exactly what's going on in your firm, because if it appears that the controls in place are not working, that you as the compliance department do not know what your employees are doing, expect them to not only be there for a long time, but you're probably looking at fines, censure, or at the least exceptions on your report. Okay, moving on, we're going to go a little deeper into some of the questions that are asked. The answers to these questions require a little more thought. You will recognize a lot of these from some most recent FINRA regulatory notices, as well as some of their like their annual FINRA exam priorities. You will see are directly reflected in these questionnaires that you receive. And this is usually the first or second item that you get when you have a web request that they're coming in for an audit. And we'll get right into some of the hot buttons for today. And this is, I've seen this question from FINRA. It will ask you, do you utilize Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, or any other social media network websites, including blogs and or forums for business purposes? There's the big part of that question. This is for business purposes. Now, most of us have in place, and hopefully you do, a social media policy. That is, it states what the firm does and how we control what our employees are doing on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for business-related items. That policy in place should state what's allowed or forbidden with each and every social media source. This is the guidance FINRA has given us, and we should be able to write some procedures and have them in our WSPs, what we're doing for social media. The LinkedIn thing's a little easier than the rest because LinkedIn is a business website, and some of the basic controls I've seen firms put in place are, you as an employee, as a registered rep of our firm, cannot have a LinkedIn profile unless you join the firm's home group. This is a control I actually personally put in place at a firm where it's easy for the compliance officer to control what's on somebody's profile if they join the group of the firm. And FINRA has taken the position that if this is out there and you're making employees join before they can use their profile, then that is actually evidence of you reviewing when you accept somebody into the group known as your firm. So this is not only a control where it makes it easy for compliance to review profiles, but to approve them as well. And FINRA accepts that as suitable approval for that particular profile. Now, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you have to have policies if you're going to allow people to do it. I haven't seen much in the way of registered reps using Facebook to advertise their services, more firms using Facebook than anything, and of course you know what to do there as far as what you're providing on Facebook. And recently at the FINRA conference, the question was posed that is a like of our website or of the firm's Facebook page a testimonial? And FINRA's answer to this question was, we don't know. Having somebody like your page without writing a comment may constitute a testimonial for your firm. So FINRA, in their infinite wisdom there, have actually said that they are working with Facebook, and firms should be able to disable that like button, not only for the employee who has a Facebook page that's business related, but for the firm. So for all those who are technically inclined to be able to remove the likability, if you will, of your Facebook page, seems to be the way the regulator is leaning, and to try to get controls around that, and even to check with your IT department to see if that's possible if your firm has a Facebook page. YouTube is pretty much videos that the regulators are allowing firms now to utilize to promote. Just make sure they're just like any other advertising, that there's compliance around it and there are controls around it and what you're doing to make sure that it is being reviewed by a principal. Pre-approval is also very important. Post-approval they don't like. If you are pre-approving and you have rationale for that pre-approval and you review what the content is, then you should be okay. Again, as tight as controls as possible. If your sales force is using social media to generate business or contact customers, make sure you have the best procedures you possibly can around the controls of this, because again, if they find fault or problem or loose controls, you can expect the auditor to be in your office longer than you want them to be. And then the next question I've seen on this questionnaire is, again, this is firm-based and employee-based. Do you utilize instant messaging, text messaging, BlackBerry messaging? Does anybody have BlackBerries anymore? Are they still around? Bloomberg and or third-party communication systems. This is Yahoo and Gmail, AOL, specifically for business purposes. Now, for the most part, most firms have your emails being recorded. You have to have them being recorded and reviewed. You're probably using a service provider, a Smarsh, or a Global Relay, and you think that's a very tight control. However, I've seen some gaps in this, and it comes down to some of the issues I've seen recently are instant messages. Okay, they're being captured, but in the review, the reviewer is reading the heading of the instant message and not the body. So make sure you, whatever system you use, be it Global Relay, Smarsh, internal, that you can see the conversation as reviewer, principal, supervisor. And you are looking at the conversation and then signing off on the fact that you've reviewed it. And again, we don't have to review every one, but you should be using some sort of Boolean search, keyword search, key phrase search, and keeping track of what you're reviewing and be able to provide that evidence to the regulator. If you can't provide evidence or you're only reviewing 1 to 2% of your electronic communications, then you're going to have an issue. I've been asked many a times, well, what kind of percentage should we shoot for? Our firm's large and we have 40,000 emails a week. This is where keyword searches are important. When you're using keyword searches, FINRA will ask you for that list that you're using and want to evidence how many emails that pulled out of the 40,000 or the big number. Then they will look to see that you are providing principal, supervisor check off on these emails around the 10% range of those you've pulled out of the key search. So if you can hit a 10% range of electronic communications, I'm not just going to say email, I'm going to say electronic communication. That's Bloomberg email, Bloomberg messages, any other email addresses that you allow. Let me step back and mention that as well. I mean, obviously the firm email address, a lot of firms just simply use Bloomberg email addresses, but if you're going to allow personal email addresses, 2 big points here. Make sure that the @Yahoo or @Gmail, that it's the person's name and not a quote-unquote nickname of some sort, as well as that you have written approval for them to use this and you're capturing it. I've seen this where FINRA does not like Yahoo whatsoever. They just don't feel that it should be used for business purposes. Gmail, AOL, any other, they just don't like it, and it just creates more problem than it's worth. You can, a lot of your Global Relays, your Smarshes, they do capture this for you. However, if you're allowing it, they're not, sometimes your employees maybe not be using it on your server and contacting clients from their home emails that you're just not able to capture. And I've seen this come around where the client says, hey, I got this Yahoo email from my broker and I want to complain. And you had no idea they were sending these emails out as a compliance department because they did it from a different server, from a different machine, from their handheld device. And you had no idea because you were unable to capture it from where it was being sent. If you're capturing these Yahoo, Gmail, or AOL emails, They're only able to do that if they're using the server that it's on that you're capturing. So just please be very, very careful as to what you allow, what you're capturing, what you're reviewing, and make sure that you're able to provide attestation and evidence. Okay, another hot button item, obviously, is cybersecurity and privacy. We're going to talk about Rule 17A-4F here and how the cybersecurity and privacy rules, you should all have that very securely in place and should be able to provide the firm, FINRA, the firm's policy on this. And who's doing what? Is there iPad? Is there pads? Is there laptops? Is there tablets? You know, this is all controls that you're going to need to prove. And what do you do in case of a breach? Do you reimburse your clients? Do you have a insurance policy? What is the recovery plan? They will ask you for this. If you don't have one, write one. If you need somebody to write one for you, contact the vendor, myself, anybody else that can help you get through this, because you will be asked to provide this. Who's using what? Is there a thumb drive storage, external hard drive devices? Just make sure you have an inventory of what you have and you can provide it to FINRA, because they're going to confirm the existence of your cybersecurity policies. Your policies should be strict and to the letter of the law. Full encryption. Portable devices, if they're not encrypted, if you have a breach and customer data gets out, yeah, FINRA's not going to be happy, but your clients aren't going to be happy either. And this is news that you don't want to be hitting. You don't want to hit the wire that your firm has been breached. Now you have to either reimburse your customers and try to do a lot of damage control. These days, IT and compliance really need to work on this together. I've seen it where IT and compliance are working together, are coming up and formalizing a plan to not only prevent policies and prevent cybersecurity hacks, but what to do to mop up afterwards. You need to have a type of policy stating this is what we do, and this is how we reimburse our clients. We will provide free credit monitoring. We have an insurance plan for lost funds. And again, at the FINRA conference last week, the FBI had one of their main agents speaking to us at the conference regarding their role in helping to fix and come in and investigate who got into your system. They do this obviously free of charge, and they provide a investigation service that's probably second to none, and have been very successful at uncovering who these perpetrators are. I was slightly unaware of how good the FBI really is, and firms need to keep in mind that if there is a problem, call them right away. Get them in there, and they can minimize damage and get your systems back, especially if these hackers now are holding firms hostage for ransom to get their data back. So I was pleasantly surprised and very encouraged to hear that the FBI not only has been out to help firms, but is a phone call away in any district in the entire United States to come out and help you through this problem. They take it seriously. You need to take it seriously, and if something, God forbid, does happen, they will come in and help you. And this is something new for us, that we were unaware how helpful the FBI is, because they do it in such an incognito type of mode. They don't want the press either about having a security breach. Okay, moving on. Personal websites. This is something that showed up on a questionnaire for 2 of my clients and not on the rest. So I thought it would make mention here. Again, this is all about your awareness of it. If an employee is using it, disclosures on it. If there's a business purpose, and as the compliance department, you approve this. A lot of your larger investment firms with teams of advisors or teams of that create wealth management type teams will provide and ask for you to provide approval to have their own website for this group. Again, treat it as your own website. It probably will need to go through FINRA's advertising department. Don't let FINRA know about it from this question on their questionnaire and an audit. They should know about it through the advertising process, and they just want to see proof that it was approved. And they will ask you, what's the purpose of this site? Is there any customer interaction, or is it a static site? So make sure you know the answers to this. Is it interactive or static? And if it is interactive, you know, what access? And again, cybersecurity comes right in. What if there's a problem? Make sure these things are secure, the sites are secure, and there's no major problems, and it's all been approved. I've seen this in some recent audits as well. Alternative business location. And the question states, do you conduct business out of any location other than a branch office? And a lot of firms just say no. However, we're going to go back to the seminars and the any luncheons, any meetings. This is what they're asking, that where are you conducting your business? And they want to see approval. So this is sort of a trick question that you've said, well, no, we don't do anything outside of our branch office, and we've already answered that question earlier about our seminars. This is a question that lends itself to almost, like I said, a trick question. Are you targeting seniors in small meetings? Are you targeting veterans in webinar type of thing? So again, just be prepared for this question. It is in addition to seminars and advertising that they try to trip you up, where if you say no to this and then they come back and say, well, guess what, we think you lied to us and said that this, you are having luncheons. And you say, well, geez, we revealed that earlier. They consider that an alternative business location. Not that you have to register the restaurant as a branch, but guess what? Customers are talking to reps, and this is what they want to know. Are customers talking to reps, and where are they doing it? This is the biggest one on our set of slides here, and this is the outside business activities. This is where most of the problems I see in audits come up. And this is just, the question is, are you engaged in any outside employment activity or private securities transactions? Real quick, the difference between a private security transaction and an outside business activity is that a private security transaction is just that. It is a participation in a private deal, possibly an equity, private equity deal that your employee will approach you on. Just make sure that these are all approved if you allow them, and the transaction, if there's commission involved, is all tracked, and you as compliance officers are completely on top of those. The problems I see with outside employment and or outside business activities is that, and I get this asked all of the time, is this a qualified outside business activity? The one main one is, I'm on the board of directors of my athletic association. Do I have to put that on my U4? And the answer to that question as a compliance officer is yes and no. You want to be specific as to what you're doing for this nonprofit. And if it involves helping with the treasury, taking in checks, doing the budget, then yes, it is reportable, because you are engaging in a financial activity at a nonprofit. You have to report that. If you are a coach or a referee, or you're doing the food preparation or anything like that that doesn't involve the finances of the organization, then no, it does not. So be specific when you ask the question, are you into any outside employment or business activities? Do they involve finance? Some reps are engaging nonprofits in helping them with their investments, and that is obviously a secondary business that A, needs to be approved by you, the compliance department, and B, needs to have very good controls around. So again, when the rep gets this question and they answer this question, usually it's, this questionnaire, they have to handwrite their answer. So make sure A, you understand what they've written, and B, it matches exactly the disclosures you ask for annually, quarterly, monthly, whenever you do it, that it matches an update, if there's any updates to the U4 that has this outside activity on it, and the U4 itself, that whatever they're writing down at FINRA matches the U4 exactly. This is where most of the problems I see, the outside business activities are not accurate, updated, or accounting for changes. Okay, sales contests. I've seen this been added to medium to larger size firms, and they're asking the rep if they participated in any product-specific sales contests or incentive-based sales programs at the firm in the last 12 months. Our response to this, we'd like to see firms not really have sales contests. I've seen nothing but problems around these, especially if they're off-the-shelf internal funds that you're trying to push or what have you. Have a rationale for the production grid calculations that they're going to ask for if you've had sales contests, and make sure all this sales-related compensations and incentives that you've provided is fair and doesn't lead to any deception for the customers. This is how a lot of contests, sales contests have been revealed. One rep said, yeah, on his response, that me and another guy see if who could sell the most funds for a month, and compliance didn't even know about it. So if you're not banning this practice and you're still participating in sales contests, make sure you are very, very strong and provide the right answer on that. Statements, distribution. This question is, do you prepare and or distribute personalized account statements, consolidated statements, or performance reports to customers? Again, this is what you're communicating to your customers. They should be standard. If you had a third-party provider for this, that's your answer. No, we don't prepare it. A third-party data provider does for us, and we actually just give them the data. You want to make sure, again, there are controls around this. What they're looking for here are false statements, obviously. This is how they discovered the Bernie Madoff problem. There is a high potential for fraud if you have investment advisor groups or small groups of brokers who get together and decide to do their own statements for customers. It's not a bad idea to annually or quarterly, whenever, check with your customers to see what kind of statements they are getting. And also make sure that if you're getting returned mail from customers that they've moved or there's a problem, that could be also a potential for fraud. Policy in place banning the practice of anyone in the firm producing account statements other than the authorized way of doing it. Okay. We've run up right exactly how long I thought this would last, which is good, but unfortunately we have only time for about one or two questions. And one of the ones I received here, which are very important, this one is very important here, I think needs to be made mention, is here, my firm is currently going through an audit by FINRA, and we received a request to complete what is called a branch office risk assessment matrix, what they refer to as a BORAM. And the question goes on to state, have I seen many of these, and how is the data being collected affecting the risk profile that FINRA will assign to our firm after we fill this out? The risk assessment matrix is just that. Who is the supervisor out at the branch? How many reps are underneath this person? And what activities are going on there? I have seen more of these, especially if you have, one or two branch offices, especially if there is an international flavor to your firm and you are doing business in the States and your main office is in another country, or you have a lot of home office branches. FINRA likes to see this matrix fully filled out. They will ask you what activities are going on in this branch and what kind of growth these branches have had monetarily for either trading or fund sales, whatever's going on there. They want to see how these branches have grown. So provide this information. These matrices are usually a 6 or 7 question matrix that has various columns that you must fill in, and they can tend to be confusing. So just A, be careful what you're giving them, and B, make sure it's complete and on time. The questions on there are cut and dry. What kind of business? They may ask for blotters to back up. So be prepared to give them a lot of data when you see that they're going to give you a BORAM, if you will. So it's not that you're being extra scrutinized. It's just they know you have branch offices, and this is a further. I could do a whole webinar on the risk assessment that FINRA will do, but if your data is wrong, late, or incomplete, you can expect that the risk will be considered high. Okay, one more thing I'd like to point out at the end of it all here, and that ties into what I just said about your risk matrix, that these questionnaires that FINRA gives you, they determine how your audit's going to go. So avoid extensions if you can. Get the information to FINRA when they ask for it. And any secondary questionnaires that come down, get them to them as soon as possible. Show a cooperative nature and have everything you provide to them as compliance officers or the provider of this information know what's in the data. I've seen a lot of times where the data was provided, but the firm didn't know what was in it, and they came back and got asked, you know, how did you achieve these numbers in this data? And the compliance person or department could not answer. So make sure you know what you're providing. That I think would be the biggest takeaway here is, you know, hit your deadlines, avoid extensions, get everyone involved at your firm that's relevant, your chief of operations officers, your operations people, let them know FINRA's there. Let them know that they're coming. If they are on site, hey, you know, it's simple. Watch the language, be professional, watch what you say. They are listening. They want to see a culture of compliance. And if you need help establishing that culture of compliance, this is what Cordium does, and we'd love to help you. So contact us. We'll be glad to do an assessment for you of how prepared you are for an audit. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you signing up for this. This is part of a series of broker-dealer-based and broker-dealer-specific webinars we are holding. This was number 2, and I think we're planning 3 or 4 more, so be looking out for these. And if you have any questions that you would like answered or want to speak to me offline, we are accepting those as part of follow-up on this. So just please follow the links to ask us any questions or any follow-up you may have or may want us to answer. Thank you very much. Again, I know all us broker-dealer people are very busy people. That's why these only go 45 minutes. Thank you again. We appreciate your willingness to participate. Have a great day, everyone.